about to. So
All
just
right. Are we ready to get started?
yes, I think
Okay.
we are. Unless if you want to wait a couple more minutes, but we can start our
Yeah.
chatting and people are start coming in.
Yeah.
We have recorded anyways.
We're recording. So today's topic, just so everybody knows, is what you measure, you improve, right? What you measure, you improve. So KPIs and key performance indicators are what we're talking about. And and Lynn's here. Coach Lynn is here with me. I'm Eric Vickery, president of Coaching All-Star Dental Academy. Lynn is our hygiene coach at All-Star Dental Academy. And so we'll even talk about perio percentages in your hygiene department, what that means, what it doesn't mean, how does it affect the numbers. So Lynn and I will converse about that a bit. And even with our trackers in place, right? And I should probably pull one up. End up sharing my screen and we'll use a random example. And let's see, I'll do that in the background while we're doing this. What do we have? Example right here. Yeah, I'll pull one up so I have it in the background so you guys see what we're talking about. And so what you measure, you improve. And it's surprising to coaches, I think, a lot of times when not only the dentist, but the team doesn't really know the numbers. You know, since we have a periodontist hosting us, if we talk about, hey, what's your perio percentage, right? What's your perio percentage? So most hygienists will say, oh my gosh, probably half of our practice is perio, right, Lynn? About half our practice is perio. And then when we look at the numbers and it's 12% perio or something like that, 9% perio. So we'll go through just the realization that we don't really have a finger on the pulse like we think we do. We don't really know the numbers that we need to know. And so I'll show you what that looks like as we go through this. And this will be a lot of audience participation tonight. So love to hear what you guys think about some of these numbers. But I'm going to go through some KPIs that we track. And Lynn, feel free to jump in as you see fit. The first one that I always hear the debate on is gross production versus net production and collections. This whole thing. I track my collections, and if I produce well, if I get patients healthier, the collections will show up. That's fine. The KPI there is what's the percentage of collections when it comes to production. So if you produce $1 million a year, right, then the collections needs to be at 980,000 or more, 98% or more. Now people will then say, well, it's of net production, though, not gross production. All right, well, how much are you writing off from gross production to net production? Now, our absolute hard cap is 10% for the practice. So if you're in network participation or your in-office membership plan or your friends and family discount or prepay, any of those numbers are north of 10% that you give away, that's something that has to be evaluated. So to go from gross production of 1.1 million down to $1 million to net production, totally fine. And then you're collecting 98% of that net production number. So these are again, our industry standards for what we set for our clients. They're what we want to have happen. If any of those aren't being met, then we look at it and say, okay, why are we losing more than the 10% because of insurance participation? Let's talk about that. Then that takes us down a rabbit hole of KPIs in itself and saying, all right, every insurance plan, how many patients, right? What percentage of practice is in this network? And number two is what percentage of write-off is in there? The average PPO is 42% write-off rate. So if that group is more than 20% of your practice, you're going to really quickly surpass, that's at 8%. You're already going to go past your 10% ceiling for write-offs. If you have multiple groups, it's going to be really hard for your net production to be within 10% of your gross production. Right? Does that make sense so far? Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. All right. And Lynn, you can unmute if you want and jump in anytime you want. Interrupt me. Okay. Anything I say off, especially in the hygiene department, just let me know. And again,
Will do.
I'm gonna share my screen in a moment and show you what I mean. So what you measure, you improve. The problem is we don't often know in dentistry how to reverse engineer the numbers. I think we all know $1 million practice means 83.3 a month. What does that mean? That means we need 53 from the doctor, we need 30 from the hygienist. Just some random numbers. Well, what does that mean? That means 3,300 per day from the doctor. That means 1,250 a day from the hygienist. So you need to know how to reverse engineer those numbers down and actually get it down to a production per patient, production per hour number. I'm going to schedule my doctor minimum to 4,000 a day because our minimum is 500 per hour, 500 per patient on our KPI. Has to be 500 per patient, 500 per hour. That's times 8, obviously at 4,000 a day. That's going to allow us to surpass that number we have to hit. And the reason we have to hit that is because doctors will come to us and say, yeah, I don't have any money left at the end of my month. I'm barely making payroll. All my team members want a raise. Okay, let's increase case acceptance. Let's increase your fees. Oh, I can't increase my fees. I'm in network. Okay, we have a problem. I just got off a meeting with the team and the doctor was saying, my primary rock time for my schedule is wide open next Tuesday. We have a scheduling problem. I said, no, we don't have a scheduling problem. And we worked our way back. We reverse engineer it and figured out we have a magnetic personality problem. Their referrals, their new patient referrals are so low that it tells me patients don't feel connected to organically refer people to their practice. So doctor, we see open schedule. Well, what does that relate to? That relates how I interact with human beings. So we worked the whole meeting on how to generate referrals organically by complimenting patients and smiling and asking how things are in their personal life and being magnetic. That's funny that you look at a schedule and realize, okay, this was the issue. Now, we went through a lot of conversation to figure out how to get there. That KPI came up and we said, all right, it's a 2-doctor practice. We need 16 patient referral patients a month, 8 per doctor. We need 4 online new patients per doctor. So we're trying to get to 30 a month, but we needed to get to 24 a month, 16 by referral, 8 by online. Notice referral is higher than online. That says something about your practice. If that number is inverted, it tells us we have a personality problem. We don't have that magnetic personality that we're looking for to auto-generate referrals. Now, we can implement an asking for a referral program, absolutely, but it starts with complimenting patients. So again, numbers tell us a problem. Solution is in training, it's in the conversation, whatever we can develop out of that. Now, if they're not getting online new patients, then that's a SEO solution, not a conversation to have with people. Could be Google review issue that you deal with. So every KPI has attached to it a solution that's solved through training, awareness and training. So we keep moving. So net production, gross production, net production, collections, 98%. $1 million practice means we got to produce 4,000 a day for the doctor, 500 per hour, 500 per patient. In hygiene, it's 1,250 a day, about 175 per hour, 175 per patient in hygiene. Well, what gets in the way of that, and I will show you, is what Lynn will talk about is cancellations get in the way of that. Lack of case acceptance gets in the way of that. Low perio percentage gets in the way of that. So when we see a client whose doctor side production per patient is, in the 300 range, we know patients aren't getting healthier fast enough. And that means there's an issue with patients buying into what's going on with their mouths and wanting to solve it. And so then our training turns into, how do you get patients to understand and co-diagnose with you so that they want solutions? Okay. Now, hygiene side, if hygiene's below the 175, it tells us a lot of things, right, Lynn? That we're not doing, maybe it's fluoride, maybe we're doing 4 bite wings instead of doing 6 x-rays, 4 bite wings and 2 PAs. Maybe it's perio percentage is low, right?
Are you diagnosing perio in your patients. And these KPIs Eric is talking about is also related to other KPIs that we're gonna talk about today, like open times. If you have good perio percentage, your KPI for broken appointments and open times are gonna go down because you're giving your patients value.
That's right. So if you know what your KPIs are, so we'll ask doctors, we'll say, hey, what's your perio percentage, or what's your production per patient, or how much open time do you have each month? And we don't know what that is. You can't solve problems that you don't know exist. And you could bury your head in the sand, right? We need an image here of like an ostrich burying their head in the sand. That would be funny right here. But you can't say, all right, we want to grow. We want to fill our schedule when you don't know what the real problem is. And the numbers never lie. The numbers will tell you how, what, and sometimes even why there's a problem, and how do we fix it. So if we saw a high cancellation rate in hygiene, we know that our system to teach is a conversation before we ever schedule the patient chairside called reason for return. Right, Lynn? And
right.
Yeah. So we would teach that, implement that to watch that number go down of open time. Every number has a correlation to a training or a system that we implement. So I'm going to show you the tracker. I'll show you the numbers we look at. And for people who like numbers, get ready. You're about to really get excited. Let's see. Share my screen. There we go. You should be able to see that. You see that okay, Lynn?
Yes.
All
yeah,
right.
Got it.
So this is beginning with the end in mind. This is a very end of a client's tracker. Okay. I'll scroll over to the right. We'll read this right to left. That seems weird. But we have all of the write-offs off of a gross production. So what happens is we total up, I think over here, we did this, all of the write-offs over here. Come on, Eric. Okay. Let's see. Is that right? 63,000. Yeah. So the whole, every month totaled up all the way down here. So we know what we're writing off by column really quickly, month over month in 2017, we can see what did we write off. And all we're going to do is say those write-offs are a credit adjustment to their ledger. They decrease the patient balance just like when they make a payment. So every month, the money that went into the account, right? They averaged almost 108,000 a month. Plus that came to 1.3 plus the 63,000 we wrote off, brought their gross collection number to 1.357. A lot of softwares, a lot of people will put that credit adjustment to reduce the production. There's another way to do it, but it actually, when you look at it from an accounting standpoint and you look at your ledger, a payment is a negative amount in your ledger, a credit is a negative amount in the ledger. Okay. Now this office also had some charges that they added back to it. And so all we're doing is taking gross production at 1.349 and saying, how close can this number be to that? And it actually beat it. And their collection rate is 98%, 100% of the goal, the target. So they actually did what we wanted them to do. Now, some months were behind, produced 120, collected 105, right? This month was ahead, collected more than they produced. But you're watching it and you're keeping your finger on the pulse all year long, while following the accounts receivable KPIs right here, making sure that every month you're looking at it and saying, okay, our total, oftentimes people say, well, the KPI for accounts receivable is, you want to be less than 60% of an average month's production to us owed, right? So if your average month's production is 110,000, at what, $66,000 is your total AR. Well, yes and no. I mean, if you do Invisalign, your AR is going to be higher. If you do a lot of Crown and Bridge prep and delivery split payments, your accounts receivable might be higher. But the goal is it's not going to get too far out of the current. So what really matters is what percentage of the dollars that are owed to you are in each of these columns. And just ask questions at any point if I talk too fast on these numbers or I get confusing. So if your accounts receivable, let's say, is $100,000, you'd want $85,000 or more of it in your current. If your accounts receivable has less than 85,000 in current, you're going to see all of these start to go up. And oftentimes it just ends up in the over 90 days. Now, again, if you have a lot of ortho, you could figure out how to separate that out by account type. But the goal is 5% or less, 5% or less, 5% or less, and anything that's over current, which is like the 0 to 30 column. So when you run your AR, yeah, you can look at the dollars, but what you're really looking at is how much of it's in each of these columns. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So in this practice, even though they had some write-offs, they have like a little bit of insurance participation. They have an in-office, membership plan, which is very smart. They're not exceeding the goal of 10% or less write-offs. So that would have to have been 130,000. They were half of that. They were at 63,000. So they were at like 5% or less of write-off. Okay. So this is total practice. Now we're going to move to the left here and look at hygiene. So Lynn, this is your part here. So in this hygiene department, you tell me what to click on, Lynn, what stands out to you?
Well, what stands out with me is the percentage of perio.
Why does it stand out to you, hygienist?
Well, okay, let me give you a little bit of statistics. According to the ADA, the percentage of perio, incidence of perio in adults 30 years and older is about 47.1%. Okay. And for adults 65 years and older is 70.1%. Now, if your perio percentage in your office is 6%, 4%, and at the most 12%, are we diagnosing perio at all? Okay. So,
Yeah.
and there are reasons why your perio percentage is low. I mean, are your hygienists probing regularly on a regular basis? Now, I have decided in my practice that I'm not going to spot probe anymore. I mean, they just ask Dr. Pierce, perio changes on a regular basis depending on the patient's immune situation, and also how looking at the number of broken appointments. You can see that if your perio percentage is low, the broken appointment numbers are high. Now, why is that?
Yeah, so you can see that as the low perio percentage started to get fixed, as we started to coach them, we actually doubled their perio percentage. Their open time went from I'll go right here, 43 hours a month. And then as it started to change, you can see it start to go down to 32. And let's just make sure hours are comparable. 255, 255. Yeah, the same. So we saw a decrease in open time as perio increased. Why is that, Lynn?
Well, because patients now, when they have been diagnosed with perio, the value becomes a little bit higher for them. So they're less likely to not show up, or and especially if your case presentation is spot on, they'll be more likely to make that appointment, and you will fill your schedule.
Yeah. And just dumb luck, when I created this tracker that I put perio next to open time, I didn't have that correlation when I created this tracker back in 2001. I just thought, yeah, let's track perio, number of patients seen, and then let's also track open time and their production is. And what I started to see as I looked at these two columns, I went, oh my gosh, there's a correlation here. I've got a tracker on a different computer that I could show you where their perio percentage is 54%, and they've got in October, November, December, 0 open hours in hygiene. 0 open hours. As perio goes up, open time goes down. Okay. What's the next number you see here, Lynn?
Production per patient.
Okay.
Your production per patient, like Eric said, you want to be at 175 an hour per patient.
And this was 2017 pre-COVID numbers, which our number was 150. So the production per patient was where we wanted to be at the time, but now you're right, it is 175. Now the challenge are these two highlighted numbers, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So your production per patient could change depending on how many hours you have open. I mean, what kind of procedures you do for each patient, and your production per hour could change depending on how many open times you have.
Yep. Yeah. So the more open time you have, the lower the hourly production goes. And here's why this is important. We'll have doctors come to us and say, hey, what am I going to pay my hygienist? My hygienist wants a raise. They want more money, which everybody does right now with inflation. Well, this is the number you look at to say, what can I afford to pay someone? And it's typically 30% of that number. So in this practice, $41 an hour gross would be their ceiling. And if they're saying my hygienist makes more than that, or they want to make more than that, then we got to figure out how to make this number grow. And we can make this number grow by decreasing cancellations. By what? Increasing perio, which will increase everything else.
Yeah, especially nowadays when there's, everybody's looking for a hygienist. And I know offices had pirated hygienists and offering them more than,
yeah,
than the going rate. So yeah, there's a challenge there.
The golden handcuff technique.
Oh, yes.
So, and here's what I found out with this practice as I'm coaching them and look at the numbers and figuring things out with them, trying to say, okay, well, your hourly's down. You have a lot of open time. Your perio's low. What's happening? Well, if you see, this is the doctor side. They were seeing 18 new patients a month on the doctor side, right? Well, they were seeing 43 new patients a month. So that meant they were seeing 25 new patients a month on the hygiene side. Well, what happens in hygiene when you see a new patient? Longer appointments, no perio. And so it was definitely a loss leader. By the way, this was a scratch practice in 2015, middle of 2015. So this practice is only a year and a half old as we're tracking this. So here's what's going on. In this practice, we were able, using the tracker, to figure out how many hours we had. Okay, so this is a 2 hygiene practice. So eight days a week of hygiene, 2 hygienists every day for 4 days. Need to see the same number of patients. They weren't. There was a gap because we had a lot of openings, and they were seeing long new patient appointments in hygiene. They're scheduling like an hour and a half or something for hygiene new patients in hygiene. So what we had to realize was, hey, this is hurting us more than it's helping us. How can we take care of this? Well, what they decided to do was to add an associate. I remember this like this was yesterday. So our associate hours went from 135 and we doubled it to 258. Seemed like the right thing to do. Well, in doing so, did that help our practice? Well, look, all it did was create a bunch of open time on the doctor's schedule. We went from almost single digits, having a nice low 6% open time rate, to all of a sudden about a 25% open time rate. And which is the cost of adding an associate, and especially in a scratch practice. Well, it must have helped our production grow. Our production must have grown because we add that associate. Well, we were averaging 81,000 a month in production. We added the associate. We're averaging 77,000 a month in production. We lost 3,000 a month by adding an associate, which is costly. And so you have to understand, when you add this associate in this way, it's going to cost you early to benefit you later. I can tell you now, this associate, their goal, I just did this meeting yesterday or the day before with them. They're in New Hampshire. Yep, New Hampshire. The associate's goal is 105,000 a month. Now the associate's goal is now bigger than the whole doctor department back in 2017. So yes, it's a loss leader, and yes, it takes time to get there, but what we recognized was, hey, new patients are great. They're a loss leader, but they're hurting us in some ways. We got to figure out how to get out of that way. This, we put a case acceptance tracker in the hygienist's hands, the lead hygienist. I said, we're going to track all perio presentations and case acceptance. And immediately the number started improving. This number now in that practice is about 25%. They now have 3 locations. So this was location 1. They now have 2 in New Hampshire and 1 in Massachusetts. So they know how to grow practices and get them healthier. Why? Because we're constantly looking at the data. So there are dashboard trackers out there. There's a lot of way to track these things, but you need to understand, what do these numbers mean and how do they affect my practice? How are they helping me grow? How are they hurting me in growth? So, somebody who says, oh, we saw 60 new patients last month. Okay, great. But is that a good thing for you or is it not? Well, if it's not increasing your case acceptance, your production, what's the point of seeing all of them? You have a revolving door. Not to mention, in our tracker, we do not allow emergencies or kids to be counted as new patients. Okay? Kids, the reason why we don't count kids, well, they didn't choose the marketing source, and they also they typically do not have treatment plans as kids. Now, if you got a 16-year-old who comes in who has a massive treatment plan, count them. That's fine. But emergencies, they're one and done. or they're coming back for a comp exam. We will count them when they have the comp exam, and we do a comprehensive treatment plan. It forces our doctors to say, I can't even count a new patient as an emergency. I better convert them into a comprehensive exam. All right. Does that make sense? All right. I'm throwing a lot of numbers out there, which can be sometimes confusing. I get that. I'm sure I'm making something confusing. So I wanted to show you a tracker that has some positive to it, but also has some negatives. It'd be pretty easy to throw up a tracker that is all glorious. But the other ones that you see that we get, will have just a ton of insurance write-offs. And I can show you what that looks like too, but a ton of insurance write-offs in this column. And some won't have, and that means they're in network and writing off a lot. And some won't have any write-offs in their insurance column because they're billing the insurance fee. And so what'll happen is their production per patient will be capped at a really low number, about 40% lower than the going rate. And if half their practice is a network, about 20% lower than the going rate. We say, we can't get this fee up to a healthy number. Why? Well, we're participating with too many plans. We have the wrong plans we're participating with. So what you see when we help someone resign from insurance is the insurance write-offs go away and collections goes up. Production will either stay the same or it may go down, but collections always goes up when we resign from insurance. We're always collecting more money. Always, 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 always. I can guarantee that if it's done right. So the next KPI would be goal setting. And what this tracker does is it takes what your actual monthly average is as a doctor and says, what would a 10% increase be? What would a 20% increase be? And what would that end up being on a per day goal, per day target? You can see there's that 4,000. And then we do the same thing for hygiene and hygiene daily goal. We also do it for collections and we do it for new patients. And so the tracker will tell you what your goals are for next year. If you want to grow at 10% or 20%, or you can prorate this and say, we want to grow at 15 and split the difference. So when you have a tracker, your fingers on the pulse, you really start to understand your KPI. Now, when I get a doctor and I'm going over these numbers with them the first time, they don't really know what I'm talking about. I'm talking too fast. It really kind of overwhelms them. But about by month 6, Lynn, by the time I'm going through all these numbers with them, they start having the answers to their own numbers. They go, oh my gosh, our look at our production per patient went down, our perio went down, our openings went up. I know exactly what happened.
They can see the story forming.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like that movie, The Matrix. I don't see the numbers anymore. I just see the people walking. I see them walking out without an appointment. All right. So what I thought we would do is create just a Q&A opportunity, because I'm sure there's a lot of questions. I have some questions that we can ask, and I can share the screen again. But if everybody, the doctors that are on here want to unmute and ask questions, Dr. Pierce, you can ask me questions. Lynn, you can ask me questions. Talk about, what sort of numbers should we have in this department? And, I'm giving you minimum numbers. I'm not giving you maximum numbers. I'm giving you minimum numbers. So if your production per patient, I say 500, and your production per patient 750, great. Now we're looking for 10% growth minimum next year. Now we go to 825. That's your goal next year. Can we do it? So we're not going to compare a great practice to an average practice. That 500 per patient is a minimum KPI to hit. It'll be really hard to survive in dentistry and pay really good team members really good wages if you're not hitting the numbers that we're saying. It also identifies patients aren't getting healthy enough at a fast enough pace as well. All right, Dr. Martinez, I saw you unmuted. What do you got for us?
Well, I mean, my situation is a little odd because I only have really 2 days of hygiene.
Yep.
And that it's hard for me to figure out, okay, so I guess, I could just do the math. But I've always seen hygiene, because I'm a prosthodontist, not as a profit department. I don't know if I'm wrong at saying it that way, because most of my patients, if they come from a referral, whether it be a general dentist or a periodontist, I send the patient back before I start for them to do the perio or the prophy, whatever, and then they send the patient back to me when I'm ready to start working the restorative work.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this applies to my practice.
Sure. Sure. No, let's talk about specialty or prosthodontics. So I think historically, if you look back, it very typical for prosthodontists to not have a hygienist, do their own hygiene, have a very small hygiene department, because we're also dependent in a specialty upon the GP referrals in some fashion. Now we have the website and all those sorts of things. So relationship is important for referrals. And if they get the feeling that you're stealing the patient to come into your practice, that felt like we were cutting off the hand that feeds you in a way, because we did have referrals coming from GPs. They said, this is a complex case. I need to send it over here to Dr. Martinez, right? But then it felt like, well, the whole family comes here and sees me. I want them to see us. Or for Dr. Paris, they come through Perio. Now they go 3 months here. They go 3 months to Dr. Smith, 3 months here, 3 months to Dr. Smith. So your GP practice number is going to be very different than a specialist number when it comes to hygiene. We're sharing patients. Not to mention, as a prosthodontist, your goal is full mouth restoration and be done as quick as possible. Totally different situation. GP is, we're going to do quadrant, arch, maybe full mouth dentistry. A lot of times it's single or two. We're just trying to get doctors to get out of single tooth dentistry. So every 1 day a week of hygiene you have, right? So you have one hygienist 2 days a week?
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, one hygienist 2 days a week tells me you have 400 active patients continually coming to see you. It's 200 patients per hygienist per day a week. So if you have a 4 day a week hygienist, you have 800 active patients. If you have another hygienist working 4 days, you have 1,600 active patients, approximately. Depends on your perio percentage, how often you're seeing them on 3 months versus 6 months. So the higher your perio percentage goes, the lower that 200 has to drop down. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
But when you're talking about perio, I mean, you're talking about SRPs, I would assume.
Two things: scaling and root planning, so the 4-3-4-1s, and then lifetime 4910s. So not just starting perio, but lifetime continuing perio. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That make sense? Now, is it a profit place? Yes. If you get north of that 175 per patient, that is where profit lives. So it is a profit department when you do that, as long as you're not paying your hygienist to work 4 days a week and she has 1 day a week of patients or something, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So when we see a hygiene department that's producing 130 an hour, like this one here, and I say, what are you paying your hygienist per hour? We can quickly say, all right, it's not profitable for you. We got to fix that. Okay.
On perio department, on the perio practice, similar than prosthodontics, because most of my hygienist works actually is more periodontal maintenance than actually skin and root planing, because most of the time the patient already have the skin and root planing done in the general dentist's office. So when things are done over there and when things are more severe, that's when I got a referral. So most of the time when I see a new patient in my office, my hygienist doesn't even see the new patient. It's actually me. So I do the patient, I do the perio, I do the periodontal treatment. That's why my hygienist actually department is a little bit, it's low, because I'm not doing skin replanning. So me, Eric, and Lee, we have this conversation about KPIs all the time, because it's not my practice. It's a specialty practice. So I know that my hygienist department is low because of that. So of course, you have if I have a patient that is direct, found me on the internet or was referred by a family, yes, I will do the skin replanning on my office. But most of my patients, they already have the skin replanning done maybe a month ago.
They're beyond that.
If the skin replanning was done correctly about a month ago, and you still have deeper pockets, I'm not going to do another skin replanning. First, because the insurance is not going to pay anyways, and second, our proof that did not work well in that case. So I know the patients are going to need to have also surgery or laser periodontal surgery. And then once I'm done, that's when the patient goes back and have 3 month periodontal maintenance. So it's one thing that, right, Eric, how many times we talk about, broken appointments, yes, it's terrible, yes, that's fine. We keep talking about that to improve. But as the production it's usually lower on the perio practice, because It's going to be done already.
Yeah, you're doing a bunch of
More
4910s. You're doing a bunch of 4910s and
Yep.
and not a lot of x-rays. And sometimes you're just including the exam. And so for a periodontist, the production of a patient is really hard to get to that number. You would think it wouldn't be, but oftentimes it is. You have to figure out what can my hygienist do that I don't have to do to increase their production. What can we do that's fair to the patient, that doesn't gouge their wallet? That's not what this is about. But you still have to run a business. So this is about getting out of the, I work in my business, and get to a place where I work on my business. And you need that monthly evaluation to look at lag measures and look back and say, okay, what's healthy? Less than 5% open time in hygiene, less than 3% open time on doctor. Those are post-COVID numbers. We've increased that. They used to be lower than that, but we've learned COVID. We used to see sick people. We don't do that anymore. All right. Other questions?
Can I make a comment for a second? For specialists that work with the GP, as a hygienist, I do appreciate when you pick up something that the general dentist does not pick up. I mean, we have to work as a team for the patient. I mean, really specialty practices, I appreciate them, even, you guys having hygienists in your practice, because not only that you're doing the specialty, but you have a maintenance portion to your practice. Now, also, when you get done with your patients and you refer back to like for a periodontal practice, you refer back to the dentist. Now, their perio is not something that you treat, it's something that you maintain. There could be chances that they could be, could have another issue with perio, so they can go back to you. And with a prosthodontist, I mean, your hygienist can pick up things that are not seen by the general dentist, because your focus is on another phase. So yeah, so it might be it might be different, but it is more of a team type of relationship with the general practice.
Yeah. So let's look. Yeah, go ahead, doctor. Yeah.
One thing that Lynn mentioned before is the spot check. Well, guess what? Officially in my office, I do a full mouth record at least once a year. But every time the person comes back to me, my hygienist is doing probing everywhere. So it's not, I mean, we might not be recording on the computer per se if there's no changes, but we're actually constantly probing over and over again.
Yeah.
So it's not only spot checks like a, Ram Joshua used to say, okay, let's go number 8, 7, 9, 10, 3. I mean, it's so quick to probe.
It is quick.
Recording. Just walk around, and then my hygienist, what she does, okay, there's a 7mm pocket here. So what she does on the notes, 7 millimeters pocket on this tooth number 3, on the meso, on the distal. So, and then we record that on the patient's chart. And if there is more issues, okay, guess what? We have to bring the patient back. Or on the same time, she can't do that. We just do a full mouth probe again and update the perio chart. So pretty much at least once a year, do a full mouth perio chart on the computer, on the system. But all the time, at least twice a year, 3 times a year, when the patient comes back, we're doing actually probing. We're doing probing, quick probing, and check the areas for bleeding, harder. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yes, but the problem with some hygienists is that there's a time constraint, and so they think that if you do full mouth probing, it's going to take so much time. But what you're actually doing is you're probing. You're only recording the changes, and if you already have it in your record at your computer, that's all you have to do is change the area that changed the pocket measurements. Right.
I see, and Lynn, just echo this. Every time we see a low perio percentage in a hygiene department, I shouldn't say every time. I shouldn't do absolutes, but man, 90.
Usually.
Over 90% of the time we see a low perio percentage in a practice. I ask this question. I say, how often are you doing full mouth periodontal evaluations, charting it and calling it out? And every time there's a low number, once a year. Every time there's a healthy number, we do perio charting, full mouth perio charting every single visit. Yeah. They are directly correlated. So the spot probe, for me, the spot probe is where perio percentage goes to die.
Yeah, I think the reason why that's happening is hygienists are inundated with other procedures that they have to do. And now I still have to pay a chart. I only did that last 6 months ago.
Yeah.
But you're not really doing the whole thing. You're just making the change, charging
Well,
the
can I ask a question here? So how much time is it reasonable to give your hygienist for
An hour.
An hour always, right?
An hour.
Yeah, my hygienist is 1 hour. It's
Yeah,
an
an
hour.
hour. That's a
So,
KPI. A KPI is an hour because and here's to echo what we're talking about here with Lynn on this is when a healthy patient has here's their numbers, they will sit down in the chair and say, all right, no force today, no bleeding today. That tells us right there that patient had urgency and value in coming in for a prophy appointment where they say it's just a cleaning. It's no longer just a cleaning. And now because your full mouth perioval on every single one of your adult patients, every single visit, they don't perceive it to be just a cleaning anymore. And so that's why when that perio percentage goes up, cancellations go down, because even the healthy patients have a different perception of what's happening in that appointment. That is so valuable. If you walk away from anything from tonight, get your team to have this sort of mentality, saying an hour for every appointment, full mouth perio, bleeding, recession on every single patient, every single time.
When your patients are used to hearing that, they're probably going to be the ones to remind you, hey, can you check this area? There's a problem here last time, So they get used to that. They're going to expect that every time.
Yeah. I've got an unfortunate story. New hygienist came into play, and you've probably had this happen where the patient goes, why didn't my last dentist tell me about this? Okay. That's a common thing that's happening. So had a new hygienist come in, and she's, every now and then she's getting a 4 instead of a 3, but every now and then she's getting a 7 instead of a 3. That was on the last charting, a 6 instead of a 3. And we're going, what is happening? It's a handful of patients. But the last hygienist got to a place where she was too afraid to tell the patient what was going on and was doing what we call the super prophy, right, Lynn?
Yeah, there's bloody prophy is another. It's another situation.
Yep. So we have to make sure that the mistake that was made was doctor was coming in and just taking the hygienist's word for it. That's where the spot probe comes into play. Calibrate your measurements. Another KPI, you're measuring the numbers that you guys are getting and make sure you're on the same page.
Yeah, calibrate your measurements between hygienists if you have multiple hygienists.
Yeah.
And calibrate the measurements with you as well. And also what you need to also calibrate is very important. I mean, this is mostly general dentists, but your philosophy of treatment, so you give your hygienists empower them to look at things that instead of you bringing to the patient, they will already have talked to the patient about. So by the time you get there, they're going
to set you up. They're going to set you up for those things. So let's talk about case acceptance, because that's the next KPI here. So our KPI tracker for case acceptance, what we're looking at is this practice saw 13 new patients, did 13 new patient exams, and they presented dentistry to them. They presented to 15 existing patients for a total of 28 patients presented to. Now the total dollar amount presented was we'll call it $79,000. That's an average of $2,800 a patient. Okay. So when we ask doctors and teams, hey, what's your case acceptance percentage? Oh, about 80%. That's just the average number people throw out. And then I like to think in my head, 73% of all statistics are made up on the spot. So they're just making up a number and throwing it out there. Well, what they don't recognize is there's two numbers at least two percentages we have to track. The number of people that actually schedule something. In other words, out of the 28 people we talk to, 25 of them schedule something. Well, we want at least 80% of those people scheduling something. Okay. Of the dollars we present, we need to get at least 60% of those dollars presented. Now, if this doctor came back and told us, my monthly goal is to produce 100,000 a month, I'd say, well, you're not even presenting 100,000 a month. How are you going to schedule 100,000 a month? Doesn't work that way. So, and you can see the month before their production per patient was way too low. So the next number is like this. Well, I can see, a correlation in getting a very high dollar amount when you're able to play it pretty safe. when there's not a lot of large case presentation, a lot of big reach. So when there's not a lot of big reach and case acceptance, when we look at this, I know Dr. Pierce, we look at this with you, and you have a lot of large cases. In this example, the large cases said yes. Here's one that you could follow up with, okay? And we could look at it and cookbook recipe it and say, okay, why didn't that patient say yes? Why did that patient say yes? So we could look back in time, and of course, names are hidden here, but we look back in time and figure it out. Now, what's great about this practice is this is the practice I was telling you about that had 54% perio. They now present $140,000 a month in dentistry. Not because they weren't finding it before, not because they're finding things that aren't there now. They just weren't presenting it before. They were approval addicted. They were afraid they were going to scare patients away. So now their average case size, our minimum here is 2,500, but now their average case size is more like 4,000. Depends on the number of patients, but average is about 4,000. It can go up because they get large cases. So as a prosthodontist for Dr. Martinez, you're going to see a lot bigger number here. You're going to see a lot smaller number here. I work with a prosthodontist in South Carolina. She produces $100,000 a month on her own. She's pitching over $150,000 of treatment every month. How is she doing that? Well, marketing for the right type of patient, getting referrals from GPs, doing complex cases, and doing full mouth diagnosis. So anytime I see a really high number here, I get nervous that we're playing it too close. And even though this number looked great, my challenge to them as a coach was, are you sure you're talking to the patient about everything? So what happened was we went to more like a, I don't know, how does that work? I think we get closer to a 60% number, 70% number, because we were presenting more dentistry, but we got more scheduled. They're never going to schedule it if you don't present it.
Mm-hmm.
So average case size, number of patients, percentage of patients that schedule, and dollars that schedule. That's the KPI we're looking at. And if they don't schedule, we're going to have a follow-up column that we can work on. And every month we can go back to it and work on what do those follow-ups look like. And as a coach, we're going to look at those results and say, okay, because your case size is low, we're going to work on approval addiction. We're going to work on over here psychology. We have systems that we take you through to help you communicate to the patient effectively so that they want to get it done. Okay. Does that make sense? Man, 50 minutes in. I knew we were going to talk fast to get it all in, Len. I knew I was going to have to really move. So other questions about this, things that you're wondering about your own practice. We could talk profit and loss side on KPIs. So do me a favor with your CPA bookkeeper, run your QuickBooks profit and loss report, but do me a favor, have them always add what's called the percent of income column. It's called percent of income, and they'll add this row on your P&L. I don't know why it's not always there. And basically what it says is percent of income. Well, your revenue was $100,000 this month and your payroll was $26,000. Your percent of income of payroll was 26%. Then break down your payroll by department, typically 3 departments: admin, assistants, and hygiene. How did we get to 26%? 8%, 8%, 10%, 26%. So 8% admin, 8% assistants, 10% hygiene. And so if you look at your cap of 26, that's absolute cap. So 20 to 26%, including taxes, not including doctor, not including associates. And you say, man, my payroll's at 30%, Eric. Whew. Okay, so why? Well, my hygienists are at 10%, but both my admin and my assistants are at 10% each as well. So they're 2% high in each department. That doesn't mean you go give a payroll cut to them. The only way to fix an expense problem is to increase revenue. Now we have to go back to the tracker and say, okay, where are we low? Oh, our hourly production is low in here and here. Our collection rate is low here. Our new patient flow is low here. It all trickles down. Yeah, please.
That 26% payroll, that obviously that's an average across the board from general practice to
general. No, general. Specialty is 20%. Specialty is 20%.
Okay, 20%. Now,
yeah,
that number, I can tell you, at least in my practice, that number has increased significantly in the last 2 years.
Inflation will do that to you. Yeah. Yep.
Because I've raised my payroll like 3 times already.
Reverse engineer that number, Dr. Martinez. Reverse engineer that number. What does your collection need to be to get that payroll percentage where it needs to be? And then you break it down by department and get it all the way down to per hour. So that means I need to be, as a dentist, I have to produce this much per hour to make sure my payroll makes sense. Or sometimes, not all the time, we find an overstaffed situation. My phone literally just rang because the office manager called me earlier today. It's her 25th anniversary next month, and she hasn't gotten a raise in 4 years, and she called me. The doctor now is calling me right now. Okay. So I hear you. We have to be giving raises, and she is a rock star. She's an absolute all-star. She gets it done. If he were to lose that team member, that would be really costly for him. And she said to me, I don't ever want to tell him he needs to pay me when I'm leaving. I don't want to, I've been here 25 years. I don't want to do that. Lack of appreciation, lack of pay, they are connected. So know your team, know what the going rate is. Look at Indeed and see what are people paying. Do not put golden handcuffs on people. Make it incentive-based. Create a bonus program that works for you. Another KPI, bonus program. We can always do that, Dr. Pires. We can have that be one of our meetings down the line.
Yeah, bonus would be nice. I think maybe for the next topic. So
yeah, okay. I'll put it down here.
Yeah, I think a bonus would be, what do you guys think? I think that would be good, right?
Yeah, another one that would be nice to talk about.
What was it, Dr. Martinez?
Overhead, healthy overhead.
Okay, so that's in the KPI. Yep. So, and every specialty is a little bit different, but I'll speak in generalities. Okay, look, we want a 65% overhead model. That 35% that's not accounted for, some of that is doctor pay. Some of that is asset-based expenses. So if you look at your balance sheet, it's different. So when they give you a P&L at the bottom, it says profit, $200,000, I don't know, $400,000. You're going, $400,000. I only pay myself, $150,000 this year. Why is it saying that? Well, that other money, they have what's called a balance sheet or a cash flow sheet. It'll show you your assets and it'll show you your, my brain just hit 6 o'clock. Assets and expenses, whatever that is, positives and negatives. Liabilities. Thank you. Yay, 10 points. Liabilities. Geez. And what you're looking at in that liabilities is, I paid my credit card. I paid my loan payment. I paid my building expense. I paid my rent back to myself, or I paid the corporation. Those things are hidden in profit. So that 65% model, when you run that P&L down the right side, you're looking at an overhead model. You want to be at 65% or less would be great. Now, early in your career, it's probably going to be more like 75%, maybe 85%, because you have all the school debt to pay now. Later in your career, you're paying off debt. Oh, bought an equipment, bought a $100,000 piece of equipment, and it keeps going like that. So our goal is to get to 65% overhead model. A lot of purchasers now are looking at EBITDA and looking at how profitable are you. And then we use a multiplier for that to sell your practices. It's becoming more and more popular, mostly in group purchases or DSO purchases. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. The great question. So P&L, the big one is payroll, 26%, maybe 30, depending on the area. And some people have a hard time with that, like San Francisco, New York. Okay. Rent, depending on if you own the building or not will depend. Dental supplies, 5%. At lab bill, 9% or less. Now, as a prosthodontist, you might see a much higher lab bill than that.
Oh, yeah.
So dental averages are going to play a different role. We have different specs for different specialties that we go by. So, and then we have a quarterly expense tracker that you can use to track your expenses. You can work with your CPA on it. But again, you can monitor and budget and figure out the right things without going cheap, without decreasing people's pay and losing your employees. That's fine. You can cut some fat off there. But at the end of the day, it's all going to translate back to how do we increase that revenue number, that production number to create revenue. That's where the KPI always goes back to. That production per patient by provider, that production per hour by provider. Yeah. Sorry, Lynn. I caught myself. Both are important, but production per hour always trumps production per patient. Because you can see one patient a day and say, I produced $1,000 per patient. And all you did was produce $1,000 that day. All right. One last question before we wrap up. So next meeting. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, going back to the spreadsheet when you're looking at treatment presentation and treatment acceptance. in your practices, who is keeping track of all of that?
Okay, so we have either a treatment coordinator or an administrative team member that will track that. Yeah. And I have like a big practice in North Carolina, 17 ops, 4 doctors, and the treatment coordinators are going, I can't track all the things we're presenting. I go, look, we're just going to track large cases and new patients. That's fine. So, it's going to give you a flavor for how you're doing. But if you want to use it for follow-up column, the more tracking you do, the better. And I'm a Dentrix guy. So I look at yesterday, I go patient by patient, I right click on it, hit other appointments. It'll show me treatment plan, the date it was presented, and I'll see an S next to it was scheduled. I can go to that appointment. I can see the dollar amount scheduled. I go back to treatment plan really quickly and I see the dollar amount presented. So it doesn't take long to get there. Yeah. So our coaching at All Star, I feel like this is important. We're talking numbers. It is very reasonable. For our online training, it's $297 a month. I hope this is okay, Dr. Pires. But look, to get our trackers, obviously, you want to work with a coach. You got to work with a coach to get our trackers. Once you work with our coach and our trackers, it's free. You have it. Okay. Get a dashboard, go pay. I don't know. You're going to pay $650 a month just to get a dashboard tracker. Our coaching is to get a coach and have a tracker is $645 a month. So we're not, $42,000 a year consulting company. We keep it very reasonable. Think in terms of on average, about $500 a meeting with us, with all the things we give you on top of that. And then it's about $297 a month to have our online dashboard training program, which Dr. Pires is a part of. So for less than $1,000 a month, you have a coach, you have an online training program that's accessible 24/7 for your clients. And then we grow options from there, like events and more coaching and training and things like that, of course. So we love our trackers, but at the end of the day, create your own. Watch this over and over again. Know what your trackers are. Know that if this number's low, it means we need to work on this system and improve it. Is that fair? Okay. All right. Sorry for the pitch, Dr. Pires, but
no, it's okay, because it's important to have a base in how to get from here to there. So that's great. So, and it's not propaganda, but again, I've been using Eric. He's my coach for the last couple of years, I guess. So, yeah. Together. And Lee, she just walked in right now. So, about a year ago, 9 months ago. So, yeah. So,
yeah. So let's see. I'm scrolling to the bottom. 2021. That's when we started. You and I. So, yeah, it's fun. It's fun to look at numbers as long as you do something with them. You can't look at them and go, okay, that's good. Even when the numbers are ideal, we're still looking at that 10% growth number. How do we get 10% growth every year? That is to keep up. Do this. Look at this KPI. How much was a cheeseburger 10 years ago? Okay. I don't know, 99 cents at a drive-through? It's not 99 cents anymore. I guarantee it's more than doubled. Now look at your crown feed 10 years ago. $1,000, maybe it's up 20%. We do not maintain our exponential growth in dentistry. Look, now translate this. How much was it for a box of gloves 10 years ago? How much is it now? What's that percentage of growth? We don't keep up with our fees. So what I put in my notes is every year our clients get an NDAS fee analysis. We offer it to them based on their zip code, and it looks at your percentile, where your fees are for all of your codes. And our recommendation is to be in the 70 to 80th percentile. We're not trying to be 95th percentile. Unless you're a prosthodontist, you're a specialist, then you might be in that 90th percentile range. Okay. But the reason for that is insurances will typically pay in that about 70 to 80th percentile range. They'll pay that fee. And it's a very healthy fee. So again, a fee analysis will also help you in your KPIs. There's just numbers
because
everywhere.
then you can get every year the ASDS booklet anyway. So it's by ADA or their webpage. So, and it's nice because they always update the new data codes, the ADA codes, the one that is modified. So that's pretty much what I base my fees on. It's on the book every day. Also, as Eric said, there's a percentage by zip code, and you just multiply by the zip code. So you know what should be, where will be the average on that. And Eric is right. So if you want to grow your practice 10%, the next year just increase 5% of your fees, minimal, and then you get the other 5% by new patients and things like that. So it's it's important to raise our fees, especially because, as Eric said, I remember I used to buy the $1 menu McChicken about 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Now, guess what? They still have the same McChicken, but it's just like a $3 now. So it's like 3 times more.
Yeah. And we're not charging $3,000 for a crown. You know,
No.
that's not where we're at, you know? So, and I'm not saying we should be, but I just want to make us aware that we typically, look, it's a double-edged sword. We like, oh my gosh, I don't want to charge that much. Look what everything else is doing though. Your employees need to pay for those things. They now need to pay for a $3 burger. You know, their interest rates are much higher. It's circular, it's cyclical. If the price of milk goes up, the price of wages have to go up. Well, the only way you can increase your wages is if your prices go up too. And dentistry is always slow to the game. We're always slow to that game. Totally fine with it, but it needs to be fair. I'm not talking about gouging. I'm talking about being fair. So make sure your fees are at 70 to 80th percentile every single year. It will allow you to pay to have the best team members on your team. I
also use the best material for the patients anyways. I mean, that's one thing. So
say that again, Dr. Perez.
Yeah, it's not only the staff, but also can actually get better materials, better quality materials, so you can use the ones that you love the most to use in your patients, because it's gonna last longer anyways.
Yep, agreed. Totally agree. Well, I've got to call a doctor about an office manager.
Good luck.
All right. Yeah. I mean, listen, let's all make sure you have your one-on-one meetings with each of your employees every single month. Just spend 15 minutes with them. It's so important. Stay connected with them so you know where they are, so you don't get surprises like this. Okay. All right, guys. Thanks, Dr. Pires.
All right. Thank you, Eric.
Awesome, guys. We'll see you in December. All right.
Thank you.
I'll see you in a couple months, guys.
All right.
I'm going to stop the record.
Thank you, Lynn.
Yeah.